Okay, welcome everyone to another episode of Paths Uncovered. It's a podcast where we get to go through untraditional pathways into technology and the careers within it. As if you're in the mood for career changing into technology, I think you've come to the right place, especially with today's guest. I've got an amazing guest on today and with a really, really cool career, as we've got Tess GARD on today.
Hello, my name's Tess. I'm a Melbourne-based software engineer. Slightly untraditional path of having had a fashion degree and somehow writing code for a living now.
I love it so much, and I think I've actually got a guest in the soon future. I think we're just booking in dates and stuff, who's gone the other way, like literally the exact opposite of yourself, where she had a proper like tech career and has started her whole fashion line and everything while in the tech career. And I'm like, that's the reverse and traditional path that I'm into it. But I'm so excited to hear how everything kind of changed around. But I think looking back, I'm like, so just for context, people, me and Tess met last week, Thursday.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen you around at some community events, like in general anyway.
So. Yeah.
But yeah, we were kind of chatting and we were at Women Who Code, and I'm like, anyone here, I'm sure there's many of the women here that have had untraditional pathways into technology, have had them there, and I'm like, please let me know so I can stop hunting people down, help. And Tess was lovely, and she was like, yep, it's me.
I feel like I just fulfilled the brief at that point. Untraditional.
100%. And I was so excited, and I think like a few other people reached out too, so I'm like really, really excited for the next like few episodes that we've got lined up. Look, we'll dive straight in. Take us back to kind of high school, college times, like what was happening. I mean, you just said you did a degree in fashion, so where did that come from? How did you end up there?
So I always was kind of erring on the side of like creative pathways. I studied fashion design at Tess before I decided to go get into a uni degree, and I took it really seriously. I was all about looking the part. I got my red lipstick on every day, and I was a bit of a design nerd though. I have to say that I wasn't so caught up in kind of the fashioniness about it. I really loved pattern making, and I love actually making clothes, and sometimes I think that maybe it does make sense because it is engineering in a way. Like there are a lot of kind of problem solving aspects to making clothes that fit a body because everyone's got such different bodies, right? I really loved that part of it, and I love building things from nothing. So being able to make clothes just from a piece of fabric, and then actually at university I took it further. I was making fabric, I was weaving and knitting. And so, it was really, the appeal was definitely about making something out of nothing. I really loved it. And I went on to having my own business for a few years, and
Oh, I love that. And I mean, when you talk about like the building something out of nothing, I mean, the amount of like YouTube spirals I've gone into where they're like, this is how I made my own like pair of pants. And I'm like, I can do this, surely. And then you're like looking and you're like, no, 100% cannot do this right now. And I think it's just such like I can't think of the word now. Underserved? No, I definitely can't think of the word. But like it's just not underappreciated. That's what it is. I was like, what's the term? But yeah, like it's such an underappreciated thing to be able to just do. Like, do you build a lot of your do you still create a lot of your clothes? Sorry, I think it's just such a random question, but like
I do. I used to. I actually make my dog a lot more clothes than I make myself because he's a whippet and he likes, having his turtlenecks in winter. So I do like to sew still, but mostly for him, not so much for me.
I mean, I think it's a great use of it. Like, let's be real, it's come out very handy at the end of the day. And also, we would love to see the photos of him dressed up. I mean, that would make me very happy.
There's lots I can send through.
Yes. So you were doing the TAFE degree. What was next? So you said you kind of started a business out of that.
Yeah, so after I finished my degree, I had started a business already. So I was actually manufacturing a women's wear label. I was manufacturing in India, and then I was wholesaling to a few stores between Sunshine Coast, Brisbane and Melbourne. So it was all about, selling the sample range, like going and meeting these store owners and selling my collection, and then they would put in an order and I'd go into production for that collection. And then, supply the goods 3 to 4 months later, and start the cycle again. So that was kind of, yeah, it feels like another lifetime ago, to be honest. But
Okay, cool. So we had minor technical issues, but we're back. So Tess, talk to me about kind of how you had this idea and like you just kind of started building essentially. Like you knew you liked patterns, you knew you liked creating things. How did you actually start kind of decide to do the whole like I'm going to make a business out of this and I'm going to go sell these things?
Yeah, I think I definitely had like an entrepreneur mind when I was younger and in my early 20s. And I felt like I just knew exactly what I want clothes to look like at the time. It's a weird thought now. And I felt really confident about just going out and starting my own thing. And I loved the idea of building something that was mine and getting to work for myself. I felt like the opportunities came up with the like production contacts in India through friends of friends. And then it kind of just all seemed like it was possible. So I felt like it just lined up for me and I just went for it.
I like that. And I think it's like those kind of things, especially it takes a different level of skill just being like, wait, these things are lining up. Like, oh my God, no, this is an actual thing that I should try right now. Because I feel like that's happened and so many people talk about it like, oh, that could have been a thing. I'm like, you could have definitely done it. Like, it was there. You should have taken the shot.
Definitely. Yeah.
Okay,
it's daunting sometimes.
Oh, but yeah, that's the other end of it, right? It's like, this isn't what everyone else does. Like, this is such a off-beaten path. You're like, oh, this doesn't look right. How do we make this decision?
Yeah, totally.
But okay, so the business is kind of flying. So you said you did that for a few years. So how did that like kind of come around to an end, I guess, or did that even stop?
Yeah. So it's kind of like just life, a mixture of life, mental health, and just progression. I think is what came to an end. I moved to Melbourne with my ex-husband. He got into medical school, and so I became the main breadwinner in our relationship, and I was, trying to make a little bit more money than my business was bringing in. A young business, not really paying for itself just yet. So I started working part-time at a university, working in student services, just behind the help counter, basically. I just really liked my job. I still was juggling doing the business, and I was finding it a lot. I was getting a lot of anxiety around like perfectionism in my sewing because I switched from producing in India to doing smaller production runs just by myself. So I had gotten some industrial machines and I had set up a whole home studio. I think definitely if I knew there was one stitch that was slightly crooked on the inside of a garment that was completely invisible to everyone, I would just feel like so much shame towards it, and it really started to take its toll. And I thought maybe I need to just give it a break. And I was really enjoying my job at the university, and kind of at the same time that I was feeling a bit of pressure with both gigs, I got the opportunity to become the manager in the student services team that I was working in, and so I took the full-time role and ended up stopping the business like about a year later when it just kind of, I don't know, I lost the real buzz that I had for it, I think, before.
Yeah, and I mean, like it takes a whole different level of like, okay, I know this needs to stop, even though, I mean, I like it. I like what I'm creating, and that kind of goes back to the whole why you started it in the first place, right? But like, I like that you appreciated the fact that the perfectionism was kind of kicking in. And I think even for the podcast, I remember at the start, like every little sound, I would go and be like, no, like this extra shouldn't be here, or like I'll shorten that, like instead of the 1 second gap that was there, I'll shorten it to half a second so that people don't have to wait. And I'm like, it was just so ridiculous, like nebulous little things, and you're like,
Yes.
And I mean, this is too much. So I'm like, okay, I can't show like 40 people are going to listen to this. Like, is this really worth the time right now? No. And will anybody listening to it notice a half a second more that they've gotten of like non-silence? It was a weird kind of a little thing, but I get that where you're like underneath something like, you can't see it. It's like bugging you.
I know. That's basically, it's the exact same experience. It's just, a bit too much. And I had just, kind of disconnected with the fashion scene a little bit. I wasn't I was having some ethical dilemmas about producing clothing, and I was like, what's my purpose? What am I doing this for? And yeah, it basically just the reason I went into it because everything was lining up. It just seems like things just weren't lining up anymore, and I wasn't really prepared to fight it.
Yeah.
I was just like, cool, I'm happy with this new role. I was getting opportunities to be a leader at work, and I really loved the job that I had, and so I was okay with it, and I kind of just veered in a different pathway.
Yeah, I love it. Paths, they're all just there. It lines up really well. No, and I mean, especially with those kind of things, and I think it's a lot easier in this day and age of like, okay, no, this has run its course. I could kind of drag it along for the rest of my life if I had to. Like, it's fine. But I like that it's like, okay, no, it's fine. Let's just try it. That's okay. Let's move on. Like, pivot. It's great. I love this.
Yes, pivot, definitely.
So you're in the student centre and you're now leading the teams. How's that all going?
Yeah.
Like, how's all the leadership kind of stuff kicking in? Especially kind of going from running your own business kind of almost solo.
Yeah, that was like a really interesting time in my life because I think I was, 24, 25 when I started. And I was the youngest person in my team, but I was also the youngest employee on the whole campus out of the 150 teaching staff and various other academic staff. And I was in this kind of funny position where, I don't know, it made perfect sense that I was in the role because I was really confident. I knew my job really well and I had really good rapport with all our students. And it was a lot of fun for a long time. And then I started putting my hands up for everything because we had a somewhat of a big staff turnaround and we grew a lot. It was a small private college when I started and it became a big national university with 9 mergers and all of these things. Like we went through having about 500 students to having about 30,000. And I grew. I had 2 staff members and in the end there was 8. But I had inherited some of them and so it was always tricky navigating, especially as a young woman. And I was, wearing glitter jumpsuits to work and then having to talk to 50-year-old accounting professors about, student complaints and things like that. And, it was difficult for them to take me seriously. And I kind of loved that dynamic, to be honest. It was, I knew my role.
I like that you stuck to it, though. Like, it makes such a difference. I'm like, no.
Yes, totally. And it brought along... I mean, it was a very rewarding job because basically I was a student advocate at the core of all of that. I was just making sure that students knew how to navigate their education. And so I was dealing with complaints with disabilities, with any kind of special needs that students might have in different areas and guiding my team to help the bulk of our students. But then, I went through kind of a bit of a burnout at the end, basically. I was there for 4 years in the end, and I ended up being one of the longest. I'd look around and I'd barely see anyone that I'd been working with, 4 years ago. So I became kind of the go-to person that had the knowledge in their head, and everyone asked me questions that weren't necessarily related to what I was supposed to be doing, and I was really busy, and it was tricky, and I was commuting to Sydney Tuesdays to Thursdays for quite a while, working on internal projects that I would always go, I'd love to be involved in that. Great opportunities, but just too many at the same time. And so, I just woke up one day in Sydney and rang HR and said, I need to go home, like I'm not good. And I took a month off. I had a huge burnout. Yeah.
God, I think, isn't it just so irritating sometimes where it's like, this is actually so great and I enjoy doing this, but oh my God, I have literally run myself into the ground trying to do everything I want to be doing. And so I kind of went through a mini one like the last year, and I'm like, and for me it was always a case of like, I would say yes to things in the future, right? I'm like, oh hey, can you come do a talk? No stress, whenever, book it in, not a problem. I was like, I mean, it's kind of prepped anyway, it's okay, like it's not going to be. And it would get to a week where it was, I mean, at the start it was only like weeks, like random weeks where it'd be like an event every day or like a talk every single day, like including full-time work. And I was just like, oh, that was a stressful week. Let's not do that again. Let's just make it through this one. And then it was like a month like that where it was just, I'd said yes to things in the future kind of a thing, and they all just lined up. And oh my God, I hated myself so much. I'm like, I said, everything individually would have been great, no problem.
Yeah.
And it was just awesome. And it's that whole thing of like, no, I want to do this. This is great. I actually enjoy doing this, but oh my God, I hate myself.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it's tricky because I loved it. But yeah, it's just too much. And now I'm so strict with my commitments and, you know, using time as like my most precious resource.
And there's still definitely times where I'm just like, oh yeah, no. I'm like, oh, I should have said no to that. Contra, like do better. And it's, I mean, yeah, like it's a work in progress for me anyway. I'm just like, maybe one day I'll definitely get it down, but like, we'll see. We shall see. And lockdowns don't help anything with the whole like no motivation, very long periods of it. And you're like, oh God,
true.
Okay.
That's true.
No, and so you took the month off, and I'm like glad that they were supportive to do that in the first place, which is hard enough to find. Yeah. Well, I think it's getting a little bit easier to find at this day and age, but it is hard to find people being supportive of that.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I was really upfront about what I was going through at the time, and I got along really well with my direct boss. So yeah, and I actually during that month I got my first diagnosis for bipolar as well. So it was a really tricky time, but it also brought a lot of things together and started making a lot of sense as to why I was even capable of having those long periods of doing a million things and getting away with it, because it just turned out that I was probably in a hypomanic episode. And so, you know, the slight superpower people talk about with bipolar, I guess, is somewhat there when you're unmedicated, but it also can be detrimental, of course. So that's when that came about, and yeah, I was upfront with my work about it. And when I went back to work after that month, they had put in place like a really strict coming back to work mental health care plan for me, which I was really surprised about. I was like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. Cool.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, and the fact that it's a thing, but also the fact that they were proactive about it. Yeah.
And so I went back and I worked only 4 days a week, and I had kind of some strict rules, like people weren't allowed to ask me to be involved in things that were outside of my role, things like that. And then in the end, I was grateful for it, but in the end, it made my job really boring. And I had actually automated most of my kind of day-to-day work that I really needed all those other projects for my job to be interesting. And it just wasn't that interesting anymore. And during the time when I was overworked and working in Sydney and things like that, one of the things I was working with is our internal dev team building student platforms, which is kind of where things start to link into tech, where I kind of got exposed to it a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, like you talked about the fact that you'd automated all your stuff, and I feel like that's like the little mini, like the earliest pathway for a lot of like transitions that I've kind of chatted over the couple of episodes and stuff, where it's like, well, I was kind of already doing stuff, and I was like, I knew I could just do a better job at times where I'd see something going wrong. It's like, there it is. Yeah. That's where it starts.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like problem solving mind, right? And I think like, I don't know, I guess I consider myself like an Excel developer before I learned how to code, because I just loved a good spreadsheet that could do stuff for me.
Anything that makes my life, instead of clicking 8 buttons, I can do one. I'm like, I'm here for it. This makes
if you can saving a click, whew, satisfying.
This is a job well done at the end of the day, I think. I'm like, yep, I did something today.
Yeah, totally.
So what was next? So you're kind of at the end of your road a little bit with what's happening. You've kind of discovered most of the kind of job and responsibilities you could at the university that it's become now. So what was next?
So at that point, it's kind of like personal life comes back into it. So my ex-husband had by that point graduated med school. And we had kind of had it in our minds that I was supporting us through med school, and that's why I was in this job to start with. And I knew working in customer service was probably not like the end goal for me. even though it had been good for the time that I did work in it. And so it was always kind of agreed upon that I would get to figure out what I wanted to do once he graduated and he could support me. But as soon as I got that opportunity, I just felt like I had no idea. So I was really lost with it. And but I did end up still quitting my job because I wasn't in it anymore, and I was really struggling to find the right treatment for my bipolar, and I really struggled to focus at work. It took me nearly 2 years to find the proper medication for me, and during those times I had really unstable times where I spent time in the hospital for various reasons, whether it was lithium toxicity or suicidal behaviors and stuff like that. So it was really intense couple years. But yeah, I stopped working, had a huge identity crisis. And then one conversation with a friend, I was up in Brisbane where my family lives. I think it was around Christmas time one year or something, and a friend of my sister's who usually he lives during the year in the French Alps and works remotely as a developer for like a San Francisco based startup or various startups. I think he changes jobs all the time. But he's, like a high
living. I
know. And that's what he was doing at the time. I'm not quite sure what he's doing now, but he was earning like a really high salary. He was working from a beautiful place. And he's like, just learn how to code. Like, you'll get a job, like, no problem as a woman, especially at the moment, because, there's gender quotas, it's fun, pays well, it's flexible. And in the moment, I was just like, yeah, all right, I'll do that. And I was so easily convinced. And yeah, I just went straight online and did probably Code Academy or something, like some free online little tutorials, like JavaScript or something. And probably a couple of weeks later, I signed up for the Coder Academy bootcamp, and like a few weeks after that, I started, and 6 months later, I was employed. Oops.
I love that.
Became a developer.
Here we are, like bish bash boom, end of story, kind of a thing. Yeah. But I mean, I feel like you've met Gretch, right? So like she would have gone through.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, she was at Coda. I don't think she was teaching anymore when I started, but she was there in some capacity and involved in the boot camp still.
Yeah. So for anyone listening, Gretch has done an episode in the past as well, and like she talked about how she got into Coda, and it was like she was literally like on a weekend she was bored. It was kind of similar things of like someone kind of mentioned it, I think, and she's like, okay, cool. And she's like, it's a thing for Monday, and she started, and I was just like, it's just such a Gretch thing to do. Where, excuse me.
Yeah, totally.
Like, yep, I'm doing this tomorrow. Okay, but it's really interesting, and I think a lot of the time it's just a case of like, don't let yourself overthink it. Like,
yes,
just get into it. Like, there's so much online courses available and for free as well, like that it's really, really accessible at times to just be like, okay, let me see how well it'll be a fit. And if it is, then you can go do all the other things like yourself. Like, I mean, going into a boot camp. How was your boot camp experience? So we've had a few people who've pivoted into tech using boot camps, and I feel like everyone's experience has been quite similar, but also very different at the same time.
Yeah, I think I didn't have huge expectations of like what I would learn in the boot camp, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Because I think having worked in private education, which is what most boot camps are, they're more expensive, they're not publicly funded, and there's a certain kind of reputation that you're just paying for the piece of paper and you're paying for the handshakes of the people that they'll introduce you to get you a job. Yeah. And I feel like I went into it knowing that, and I just thought, I'm paying $21,000 to secure an internship because these people will hook me up. Yep. And then anything I learn on top of that will help set me up for success was a bonus to me. So I know that's a really backwards way of approaching education, but a lot of the other students in my bootcamp that had really, really high hopes of learning how to be a developer in 6 months were disappointed because it's really hard to learn how to code in 6 months. And so I definitely had the mindset that I just wanted to be exposed to the different bits that, that you need to know about when you're an engineer. And I wanted to know how it worked on a bigger scale, and then I wanted to have the opportunity to learn more about it in the job or in an internship. So my experience of it in that way was good because I had set my expectations. Yeah.
I mean, like if anything someone takes away from this is just set your expectations to a level you'll be okay with. Isn't that like the easiest advice to have, which everyone knows and kind of forgets all the time.
It's hard to, right? Yeah.
It's ridiculous. I mean,
because if you're like a dreamer, you think, great, I can change my life and learn all these things. And you can. I think it's also just about your mindset and how much you've got to give every day, because the boot camp, well, the 6-month version that I did at Coda it's 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, every day for 6 months. Like, that's a big commitment. And I just felt like the only goal really that I set myself in terms of learning while I was there is just to show up. I didn't tell myself, write the best terminal applications, or, make sure you're like acing all the quizzes or the coding challenges in the morning. I was just like, you don't need to do anything, because this is a pass-fail scenario. You just need to pass the assessment, get the piece of paper, get the internship. All you have to do to achieve that is just to show up every day and try. And so, I figured that even if I wasn't really focused that day, if I still showed up, I would somehow learn by osmosis anyway. So I just show up.
That's a really good way. No, I'm sorry, but that is an absolutely great way of approaching this, especially with tech, where like, I've definitely had days where I'm like, I'll spend like 4 days trying to solve something, and I'll just go away for the week and I'll come back on Monday and like 5 minutes and I'm done, and I'm like,
oh yeah,
this is a joke. Like, what is this? I hate this life. But then at the same time, like the high of getting like something work, you're like, oh, next one, let's go. It's
I know,
bizarre. I hate it, but I'm still here, and I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah. I think that wanting to be perfect in engineering and overthinking things can be really detrimental. So like being an observer, and I don't know, try not to stress so much all the time. I feel like it kind of just works, even though it's not so natural to do most of the time.
I mean, I've definitely gotten very okay with hacking a solution together and then fixing it later. Like, I'm like, I need it to just work. If this
best solution is a working solution,
exactly,
right? Yeah,
exactly. And I'm like, if it needs to look like 70 different pieces duct taped together, so be it. We like super glue it after. Like, I don't care anymore. And I think it has helped. And definitely in terms of like, because I mean, I would end up spending so much time just making sure, okay, like this is not the way, like instead of having it in like say a loop where it's like it'll do everything for me, I'll just write it out 18 different times for the first bit, because I'm like, I just want to see how every step works. It'll fix it, and then we'll go back.
I do that.
Join it. And I think it's just, taking a break. But like, I'm sorry, your experience it was different. Like, I haven't heard anyone putting it that way, and I think it's so important of that expectation setting of it's 6 months. There's only so much the human brain can do in 6 months. Not just however much motivation you want to put behind it, or like that determination of being like, I will do it. I'm like, there's a physical limitation to it.
There is. And I think some of the other people in my class, they were making complaints. They were like, oh, we should know this by now. We should know this. Employees want us to know that. I'm like, what do you want them to fit in 6 months? Like, it's just not going to work out. And then you go for a 3-year degree and you're being taught a lot of things that aren't even applicable to the job. So, I don't think there's a perfect way to really teach this. I think it needs to be complemented by on the work, on the job training.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned how kind of was like, I just need to pick up the bits so it makes sense moving forward, right? And I think, it definitely applies, because I did a degree in financial maths, right? And actually, like, it was literally, I'm not even joking, like, we would go in and the lecturer would write with chalk on the board, and we would write things down, like theorems and formulas. It's as far from tech as you can imagine. And I mean, everything I learned around data science and everything was on the job. But because I kind of had picked up enough generic stuff before that, I was like, okay, we can figure most of this out as we go. And I think that's kind of similar in that sense of, okay, I know how things work, or words will spark something in my head that I can Google later and it's fine.
Exactly. It's really about knowing what questions you might want to ask, right? Because if you don't know anything, then you're just like, just lost. But if you know what that word might mean, you're like, oh, is that how that relates to this? And then you're making links and ties when someone's trying to teach you about something or someone's exposing you to new content. It's all about figuring out where to look for the information and how to ask the right questions, and having that base knowledge gives you the ability to do that better.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so talk to me then about like what it was like actually coming out of the boot camp with kind of your own experience of like trying to get an internship and stuff. How did that go for you?
So with Coder, we kind of did an internship application through, like, they've got a contact at the college that helps you line up some internships. You can apply for them as well outside of that. But I leveraged that because that's what I was paying my money for. I was like, cool, give me your connections. And I had a couple of interviews. I had a couple of internship offers, and I just picked the one that paid me more, which is always, at
not
that always the best choice, but...
No, but it made sense at the time, right? Where like you've just spent so much money learning and spending on the degree, like it has to be done.
Yeah. I was going to be picky about, like, so the internship I picked was a longer internship, and they paid us, whereas the other one was going to be a bit shorter and about half the pay. And I just thought, which is the one that's going to culminate in a job? Probably the one at the bigger firm with the bigger budget. And it was a consultancy rather than a design agency. And so I thought, well, I'm going to have maybe the ability to work in different sides, of the puzzle. Yeah. So I don't know, I had a good vibe. I think when I was interviewing for the internship, I definitely was going into it with the idea that I was actually interviewing them. Because, I think it's important to understand that, you're committing to them and they're not just committing to you. And it's not, you're taking a chance on the company as well. And if you see red flags around culture and around how they treat people, or, their approach to work, or even the kind of contracts they have that you might not agree with, like, that's going to become a problem later on. And there is something to be said for just taking your first job at wherever you can and then just putting in, your hours as a junior and then finding something better later. But I guess I felt like I had the opportunity really quickly to pick where I wanted to go, and I felt grateful for that. It was definitely... Huh?
I'm very glad you talked about the interview part of like you're not in the hot seat, like you have the power, and especially at that stage of your career, like I definitely didn't. Like I think I had it right. I was like, I knew, and it's so interesting how I compared this to. So I haven't really thought about this before, but I remember going in for like graduate like interviews and stuff after college or during college even. And I remember like the whole like how do you do interviews? Well, like make sure you have your questions at the end because it shows that you're interested. And I hate, like, looking back, I hate that that's the, like, reasoning for it. It's like, have questions like you know what you're getting yourself into. Like, it should be that, not just like, let's pretend you're interested. Like, I always had questions. Yes. And now it's interesting. And I was kind of talking about this recently enough. So, like, since I moved jobs and stuff, and I was like, especially in tech right now, the way the market is, like, so many people keep reaching out right now. Because like, there's such a shortage in Australia, at least. And I was like, Dad, like, this is so weird. It's like, I'm interviewing them now because they're asking me.
Yes.
What like a whole like turn of tables with like so quickly. And I'm sad that that's what it took me to realize I kind of had that power the whole time. Like, and now I'm just like, if I'm not asking questions for half the interview, this is not a good interview because it's a 50-50. Yeah. Like, this doesn't make sense to me otherwise.
Absolutely. And it's a win for the company too if you're only going to agree with it if you really want it, not if you're just desperate for the salary, because it probably means you'll stick around, right? So it's a win for everyone if it's a proper cultural fit, not just like, cool, I got a job. But obviously that comes from a slightly privileged perspective. Some people just need a job, right? Like that's
and it's definitely very much kind of that like this was a recent conversation I had around the whole, like, you know, right now the great resignation, is that what they're calling it at the moment, where everyone's just quitting their jobs and stuff. And I'm like so happy for them, right? I'm like, don't get me wrong. And there's someone's like, I quit my job because I hated where it was and it was a bit toxic. But to be able to do that is just such a privileged position to be in to begin with. Like, it's great. And like we talk about how, like, just quit it because you hate it. Like, you're talking about how much you hate this, but it's just so not a possibility for so many people out there. It's
absolutely. I mean, too bad about bills and stuff and how living's not free. Hey.
I remember my friend at one stage in college was like, I'm sorry, where did I ever ask to be born into this? Like, I didn't ask to be born to pay bills. Like, what is this?
It's ridiculous.
But I think, no, and I mean, I bring this up essentially just because, like, I'm so glad you talked about the personal parts of it. And I feel like at this stage in the last, like, 6 episodes, I've said these exact same things. So, hey, if there's repeat listeners, I'm sorry for saying the same thing. But there are lives behind technology, and there's lives behind careers and decisions that people, especially in interviews, just don't kind of think about. Like, I mean, taking personal breaks and taking time off where you need it to, like, just be like, no, I need this time right now to just basically survive past this. It's important. And I think people don't put enough stock into it. Like, I think people come out way stronger having taken breaks than just pushing through some jobs at times.
Definitely. Yeah, for sure. I felt like when I finally did agree to, you know, I took my job offer, I was just feeling really comfortable in that decision. And like, just not stressed. I didn't feel like I was, you know, having to bow down to the people who had hired me. I felt like they wanted me there. And I wanted to be there too. I felt like there was this mutual respect that kind of came from, like, feeling like I had the power to say yes or no. To the job. And I felt quite valued pretty quickly in my internship, which I think was really important. It made me feel like I wasn't, like, you know, it's definitely not like, oh, you're there and then you're working overtime to try and prove your worth as a junior and so that they'll notice you. And, you know, I just thought, well, if I'm there past 5 o'clock, they're going to think, you know, I have good time management skills, like, whatever, like, I'm going home. And if I'm not playing table tennis in my morning tea break, there's something wrong. You know, it was definitely a real juggle of, like, working and being focused, but definitely always taking those breaks and leaving on time. That was so important to me. And I'm glad that the company that I ended up working with really understood and valued that too.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I don't think people understand at times, unless they've been in that position, the power of feeling that valuedness at the start of it, and, like, the understanding of that culture and everything to begin with, until you've been in there and you're like, oh, wow, okay, this is different. This is just unprecedented kind of a thing. Because I remember when I started the grad job at Redify, and I think my second day or something, they're like, oh, that's in the Power BI, like, reporting system. And I'm like, what's that? Don't even know what that is. Tell me more. And it was literally all of our financial reporting was transparent. Like, everyone had access to it. Everyone could see exactly what our turnovers were everywhere. Obviously not, like, personal information in there, but, like, the company stuff that we are in this company, we're building towards this. Everyone should have access to what's going on. Yeah. And I was like, I've been here 2 days. Why are you showing me this? This is a bit weird. But, like, it goes back to that whole, like, oh, I'm wanted here and I want to stay here. And it just all lines up really, really well, I think.
It's such a good sign from a company when there's transparency like that from everyone.
Yeah.
And feeling valued, like, especially as an intern, when you kind of feel like, oh, I'm just the one that's here to learn and I'm not contributing any value to the company. But they made us feel like we were contributing, like, you know, cultural worth from the start, and we were just part of the big thing. And on my 3rd day at Mantle Group, I was on this company ski trip. And I was like, cool, this is great. Landed the jackpot.
So you picked the right one.
I think I did, yeah.
So that internship, I'm assuming, then transferred over into a full-time job?
Yes, so after, I think it was a 9-week internship. So Mantle Group has, like, an umbrella for a bunch of brands, and basically we got a few job offers all of us, so there was 4 interns in my cohort, and we all got job offers to 3 of the different brands. Like we could become cloud engineers or just standard software engineers. So at the time, platform and cloud stuff just terrified me. I was like, no way, these people are in the basement. I'm gonna I had such a stigmatized view of it. But yes, no, I am now friends with some platform engineers, and they're okay.
So they're not just in the basement wearing hoodies. Okay, it's
No,
good to know.
they've got city views sometimes. But yeah, no, got an offer, and got given the option to have a break and start later or start straight away, and I just went straight into it. It was a little bit of a tricky transition, only because it's a consultancy. Getting the job offer didn't mean that I was actually going to be out on a client site straight away, because they still had to negotiate placing me with a client that was going to be like willing to have an associate engineer who's just finished an internship come onto their project. So they were already in talks with ANZ, one of their biggest client, about bringing on a bunch of junior engineers to their projects. But it just took a little while. It took nearly 3 months. And so during that time, I was on the bench, which is what they refer to when you're a consultant with no client.
Yeah.
So I kind of just felt like, not getting picked on the sports team. And at first I was like, cool, I get paid to hang around the office, eat the free snacks, play table tennis, and do self-learning. I mean, I was contributing a little bit to an internal project for a while that Mantle were building in-house, like a little mini in-house startup. But yeah, for the most part, they were like, oh, at ANZ, you're going to be writing in Go, so, you should just use that time to upskill and learn Go. So I was like, cool, I don't know what Go is. And then they were like, you'll just be purely back-end. I was like, oh, I just thought I'd be writing CSS my whole life. So I was like, interesting. I better learn what an API truly does. What's gRPC? I don't know. So yeah, I just, bought a bunch of Udemy courses. I just played table tennis and did self-learning for 3 months.
This is like the untold truths about consulting, isn't it?
Yes.
A lot, don't get me wrong, there's definitely consulting places that are like, go, go, go. Here's more work. You're in and you're out. And I don't hate that. And then I also hate like 6 months straight of like, just learn, you got this, take your time. And I'm like,
I know,
I am dying by myself, please don't do this.
Yes. At first I was so stoked. Yeah, definitely. At first I was like, great, this is brilliant. And then I was like, oh, why doesn't anybody want me? And they were like, oh, it's not what it's about, like, it's fine, don't worry about it. And I was talking to my mentor and I'm like, this sucks. And he was like, it's just the way it is, like, it's just the way it is, don't take it personally.
Yeah. The cycles of consulting, and then the minute you're on a client, you're like, oh, I wish I was on the bench. Wish I didn't have 100 things to do.
Yeah, totally.
But look, you sound so happy at Mantle, and I'm so glad that you found your way to kind of at the moment where everything's working and everything's kind of keeping you challenged and everything's going well. Exactly.
Yes. Fingers crossed it stays that way.
Oh no, I'm very happy for you, and I'm so glad that you kind of came on and shared everything about it, especially like the whole parts of, obviously, like everything else happens in the background and there's other decisions to be made other than just, hey, will this be a good step up as a next direction, and is this better money, which is, don't get me wrong, quite fairly a lot of people's decision making. But yeah, and then the fact that like, as in like, it's such a different experience, and I think your outlook on things is very good, and I'm very appreciative of the fact that you talked about it, like the whole like set your expectations to, and I mean, for me, like listening to it, I was like, set my expectations to what I truthfully know about myself, which is very different to what I imagine of myself at times. Like for the 6-month bootcamp, I'm like, I could have said, I'm like, I know like fake me would have been like, yeah, I can definitely go in and like learn something every day, and I'm like, there's no hope in hell that would actually happen for me.
Yeah. It's hard.
It's so hard keeping it going, but I'm so glad that you shared all of that stuff with us, and thank you.
That's okay. Thanks for having me. It's a nice chat.
Oh, I love it. And look, I'm sure there's going to be loads more coming along. And I mean, we'll definitely get, like, I've literally just recently had like one of the past guests who've just moved into a completely new career in technology. And I was like, a path continued. I like it. I'm sure there's going to be so much more coming down the line for you as well, Tess. And we will get you back on and we'll talk more about it once we do.
Sounds good.
Perfect. We'll be back again with another episode of Pats Uncovered in 2 weeks' time. Until then, stay safe, I guess, and keep sane. I think that's a good one to end on today.
I think it's fair.